Hey, good morning, Boris. Nice to have you with us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the attendees of this webinar. Thank you so much for taking time to join us for this discussion. So today's discussion is going to be about outbound. And as all of you know, outbound is one of the most challenging aspects of the sales process. And it always throws new challenges to those who seek to get it right. And today we have Boris with us, who has been doing sales for the last 18 years, more than 18 years, in fact, and has been driving outbound and sales strategy. So today we're going to talk about how Boris helped achieve one of his customers achieve 10 million ARR through one of his outbound sequences. And the key thing about this particular outbound sequence is that it is a 18-month sequence. Yes, I was surprised when I heard this first time as well, but it is in fact such a really good process that was put forward by Boris, and it has been working wonders for his client. So without any further ado, let's hand it over to Boris. Boris, thank you so much for taking time to do this session, and we are really excited to hear what you have for us.
Sure, my pleasure. Let me share my screen. All right, what's our intro?
Yep, we can see your screen.
All right. Hello, everybody. Quick intro to myself, a little bit of a background. I'm not going to go too much in detail. I think the interesting part here, particularly for my history, is that I actually did not originate it in digital. I came to the US as being a photographer and started building my own websites. And pretty soon was asked to do many portfolio sites for photographers, and then my first e-commerce site. And one of the first insights once I got my first bigger commercial jobs were that I saw that there was a bit of a friction between the sales departments and the marketing departments. And I think that was mostly based on the fact that it seems to be that the sales department was often very jealous on the big budgets that the marketing departments were getting to promote certain initiatives and services, but there was sort of like a missing connection. And what I felt like was like that if the sales department actually would see the impact on their final numbers and their bottom line that the marketing department was driving to a large part, that then there would be more of an alignment and more sort of like an understanding rather than sort of like that sort of like artificial friction that I saw. So pretty soon I started looking into analytics. I started looking into emails. I started looking into CRM systems and trying to bridge the gap between sales and marketing. Quick agenda for today. So obviously, everybody kind of like is very interested, like why an 18-month sequence and how to set up. I want to kind of like cover a few key points, common misconceptions that I've seen when I'm working with my clients. I want to explain a little bit what I see as a core of the a successful sales engine. Explain a little bit around the sales cadence, what it is, and why it is so important. Then we're diving straight into the length, timing, and the follow-up for the sales cadence, where we dive in onto like 18 months. I explain a little bit my framework that I use for the email, what type of content to use, how to nurture your prospects, and then I'll share in the very end also a bonus that I have for the participants today, which is a workbook that helps you to rapidly lay out your playbook and your strategy for this.
Great. So Boris, a quick question on this. So the client that you're talking about, obviously you cannot reveal who the client is, but Can you give a brief segmentation on what the client actually does, what industry they belong to, and size of their company, just to give our audience an idea of what is the kind of company that we are referring to here?
Sure, absolutely. So that particular client, like many of my others, is in the B2B service industry. It's a small business that is in a very mature vertical, definitely competing against some of the very big 800-pound gorillas. Um, they were very smart in positioning themselves through um, educating content. They're really focused on a very specific niche, which I think is also great. And I think why they're also so relative to to much of my work and maybe also to some of our customers is that they have a very small sales team. And one of the challenges that I always see is like how can a very small sales team in general handle and prioritize their audience? And that's also something I'm going to cover here today.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. So some of the common misconceptions. I think the key here as a takeaway that I want to have everybody to take away is that sales is really about building relationships. And the way you build relationships is by having a personalized, targeted outreach. And you can only do that if you really understand the different needs and pain points that your prospect have at the different stages of the buyer's life cycle. Um, and that is really the key. If you cannot deliver value to the prospect at every stage during your conversations, during your emails, and any other material that you may share with them, um, there's really no incentive for them to kind of like keep staying in touch with you, and that is crucial if you want to kind of like nurture that sales relationship along. So I'm a big fan of a consultative and personalized approach. Um, and the second pain point is, or the second main point is really that most people that I've been working with do not have a sales cadence, and that is why I'm so like dedicated an entire slide in this presentation to really explain how that works and how I typically set it up and what so like my framework is. So what's cool of a successful sales engine? As I said, like one of the main points is really that you understand your prospects and their needs, that you establish a sales cadence, that you segment your prospects depending on what vertical you are in, and you're targeting your prospects. I'm a firm believer that nobody has the same needs. There's not a formula, a simple approach. You really need to understand what the particular pain points are. One of my favorite ways to get the foot in the door is what I call a gift to get. And that could be anything that provides enough incentive for the prospect to more or less open the door and let you in and invite you in, whether that is by sharing an email or giving you an appointment or first phone call, anything that sort of like allows you to establish the relationship. This could be anything from a webinar like this, or it could be a white paper, it could be some sort of a free audit, anything that helps so like the client and you to establish that first step in a relationship. Further, I think educational content is one of the key drivers for successful sales engine. Besides the fact that it really helps to build trust because you can show your expertise. It is also particularly great for SEO, since mostly we're going to also post that on the website. I like to amplify, if possible, the nurture process with paid media to kind of like really stretch the reach that you have beyond your existing Rolodex. and really reach more people and open up that little bit. And then obviously, especially with small sales teams, that you automate as much as you can. So you filter out the unqualified leads, you prioritize the people that show high engagement, and you automate the tasks. And that way, typically a particular small sales team has a lot more structured approach and can handle a lot more of the sales process. Sales cadence. It was really one of my favorite part of this presentation, and probably the most important, because I see from my experience with many clients that is really where things so like, I don't want to say fall apart, but many clients struggle with this. And the sales cadence really is nothing else but a very documented and systematic approach to prospecting. And the reason why this is absolutely necessary is why I think most salespeople have an approach that they follow and they systemize. It's often not documented. And if you don't document it, it's not really measurable. So you can't kind of like really see where you're succeeding in your approach and where maybe things need some sort of improvement. But the sales cadence also establish and makes the messaging consistent, what type of communications you're going to use, what pain points you want to address, what your unique value proposition is. And if you have some sales cadence that is documented and that is mapped out, it makes it immediately consistent throughout the entire sales organization. And we can look at it, we can revisit it, and we can improve it, which is one of the key points of having it.
Got it. So I have a question for you on this, Boris. So the first touch that you do over social media, or and a phone call comes later. So what advantage does that give you when you reach out to somebody on social media or email before you call them on the phone? Does that give you an advantage? Is that a very deliberate step that you put in?
Absolutely. So from our experience and what I've seen particularly with another client of mine where we did a lot of outreach, what we realized is that if we have a social media touch point, so for example, that could be just visiting the LinkedIn profile of a prospect before you actually reach out, or maybe it's the same day you reach out on the phone, or the same day we have an email. But what we saw that if the prospect sees a social touch and outreach via social media, that the likelihood that they engage with you on the phone one-on-one increases dramatically. And particularly with one of my clients, we tested it out and we saw definitely an increase of that. So it's something that I do for all of my sales cadences, where I have a social touch as a crucial point of the initial outreach phase and throughout, actually.
Got it. Thank you.
So this is the where we're getting into the why I decided originally to do 18 months as a sales cadence, and this is based on the research from Gartner from 2018. It's kind of interesting. The client that I did the first sales cadence with went for that length. I'm working with him for a very, very long time. So I did that actually before this research came out, but it was nice to get that validation. And the original Gartner story research included also other countries. I focused here on the US, and it really shows what the different stages are, particularly for SaaS services and in a B2B environment, and the length of the different stages. And I think what you can see here is that if you look at just sort of like the typical cycle, people when they start sort of like becoming aware of the problem they have and they're looking into solutions and the selection process, if you compare that with the traditional approach that many salespeople have, where you basically give it like, let's say 6 or 8 weeks. You're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table, and you may be completely misaligned with what stage the prospect is in. And as I said, like as a prospect goes to different stages of the sales cycle, they have different needs, and you need to be able to deliver value throughout the stage. Somebody that just became aware of a particular problem that they have within the organization um, needs different content that somebody that is in the selection process where they do a comparison shopping. Maybe they're comparing your service against another service, and the content needs to be tailored to that so you can guide them. It's also maybe that in the awareness phase, for example, a senior person asked a more junior person to do some initial research to evaluate what's out there for solutions. And at some point, the senior person takes the process all over when it goes to a selection and purchase phase. So at this point, you're having two different buyer personas throughout the stages. I think particularly when you're targeting larger enterprises, the buying cycle is fairly aligned with the budget cycle. Typically, in the US at least, people get they put the budgets together in so like October, September, get it put it in October and often get approved in October, November for the new coming year, and that is when they start looking at solutions. So when you first get in touch with somebody, they may be evaluating, but let's say for some reason, you don't come to an agreement. You want to be in touch with them when that buying cycle goes to the next revision, where maybe it's a requirement by the enterprise to kind of look at other solutions again, or get a new RFP in, or maybe they had a chance to try our system and they're actually not happy what they have. And that's where the 18 months to 22 months cycle really comes in. This is the framework that I want to explain that I use for the first sequence. And I think this is really, and I particularly talk email sequence here. This is really crucial because I think from my experience, when I look at sales emails that are being sent out to prospects, it's very often a hard sell way too soon, particularly when you do a cold outreach process. The prospect often or most likely doesn't know you. So you need to establish rapport and trust first. And that's really the job of the first sales sequence. That's the initial outreach. It's a sort of like fairly high paced, typically free sequence. And the particular steps that I use for this is the initial email. It's a quick intro, who you are, what you do. You maybe want to bring up one of the core pain points, and maybe have like one sentence about how you provide a solution. And then the other next coming emails, the next three ones, it can be also more depending on your vertical, is all about developing that trust and that rapport with the prospect. And the way you do that is being authentic, telling your story, show your prospect that you have expertise in the vertical, that you understand the problems, that you're very familiar with their particular industry, and that you've been there. And then you want to show proof of your success. So you want to share case studies. If you have multiple verticals that you target, I would make sure if you can segment that you kind of like send the case studies that are like particularly tailored to that vertical. If not, you could also send multiple case studies. But you really want to show here that a case study where the prospect can say they have solved that particular problem that I'm having in a very similar industry and a vertical, and they can repeat that. I recently got my hand on a focus group research for that we did for one particular client, and what came out of it is that the executives of a company or the decision makers for the sales process um, basically validated for us how important it is that they see that a vendor has experience in their particular industry vertical. It's a crucial point of making the decision. So you want to establish that in the first email right away. The next thing is social proof, right? Testimonials. If you can do video testimonials, that's great. But any kind of testimonials you can get from clients, that is a very much like a big factor in establishing trust with your prospect. It helps to move the process along. And the frequently asked question. So the frequently asked question is tricky. It says frequently asked questions, but what it really is in that particular email, we want to address the objectives that a salesperson for your team typically get when they engage in one-on-one with a prospect. So let's say, for example, you get pushback on price, or you get questions about, well, how long is the onboarding process? Does it interrupt my operations? What are sort of like, like are there typical things that, let's say, the IT department says where the process falls apart? You want to address these before you actually get on the phone call with them, if possible. That will dramatically help you to overcome those objections, and most likely, or hopefully, you don't even have to deal with them anymore. I often break that particular email actually out in a single measured email that goes to everyone, because then I can see exactly who opened it, and only the people that opened it and addressed it and like open that and click through, I can move them on into the next part of the sequence. It's the actual sales offer. And when we get to that email, we have now introduced ourselves, we built rapport and trust, showed our expertise, we dealt with initial offers, and now we can actually ask and either ask for meeting or ask for a call, and kind of like dive in a little bit more and being a little more aggressive on the actual sale and trying to move. People that are not engaging, we don't want to stop reaching out to them. If they don't hit unsubscribe and you see that they're like, they have opened your email, there's an open invitation to keep emailing them to them. If you want to be compliant, yes, you should always have an unsubscribe link in your email, and you should honor that request for the unsubscribe, but if people are opening the emails just because they don't pick up the phone call and they don't not yet talking to you, doesn't mean that you want to stop after you send them your offer and you ask for a meeting, right? What we do now is we move them into a nurture phase, and that means is can jump next to the straight slide. And what that means is that the nurture phase, we slow down. So this is the first sales cadence with the framework as I just described it. And you can see I kind of like in red put the different emails in there. Now we have mixed in phone, and we have mixed in the social touch. And when I was particularly just showing that slide with, to Surender and Prem in a prep for the call, immediately the question came up like, well, why is LinkedIn before the first phone call? And so we had a client fairly recently where we had somebody, a salesperson, DSR, doing the outreach. And what we realized, if you go to a prospect, so you sent the first email, and within a very similar time frame, either the same day or next day, you go also to the LinkedIn profile. You don't really have to necessarily engage. You can try that. You have to test that out. But even if you just look at the phone call, if people are engaged in using LinkedIn quite a bit, they will see that you have come to their profile. That alone changed the dynamic for the call. We got a lot more engagement on the calls and people picked up the phone. And that is why I think it's always wise to send an email and do a quick touch on a prospect on social media, on LinkedIn, preferably. And in the email, maybe you also announce like, hey, you know, I'm going to try to reach out via phone. It would be great to talk to you. So this is a classic first cadence implemented. So like the first build out that we do, and you know, you can see this on the right side, time frame 4 to 5 weeks, 17 touch points, 7 emails, 6 phone calls, 4 social touch points. That's a very robust way of engaging with somebody in a high engagement phase. Let's say, for example, they did download a white paper or they participated in a webinar that you had. That would be something that I would strive to implement. Like I said before, like there is no silver bullet or like a formula that works for everybody. There's variations in everything how this can be done, but this is a pretty good solid framework how I would start out and start testing things. And all you really have to do is write 7 emails and have a couple of phone scripts ready. Which yes, it's work. You have to think it through. It has to be directly coming from your buyer persona, which inform all the content development. But this is very manageable, and especially if you have, you know, services like AI that are, for example, built into Salesgear, that makes it tremendously easier to at least get a starting point where you typically need like an hour to get to it. Like this gets you to 70%, and then you can make some, you know, custom tweaks to get it right. Okay. So this is the what I call the nurture cadence. And the big difference here, there's really nothing that dramatically different with most things. The big difference here is that if you have reached out to somebody for 6 weeks, you know, this fairly intense schedule, they have not unsubscribed, they have not clearly communicated to you, look, I'm not interested, don't call me anymore. That means that you have an open invitation to keep communicating to them and demonstrate to them that you have expertise and you can deliver value to them. And that is what you do in a nurture sequence. We just want to slow down the pace a little bit anymore. So now we're not reaching out, you know, every week. We kind of like start slowing it down, and in the end, it ends to be up like once a month or once every 3 weeks. Some people do once every 5 weeks. And you kind of like sprinkle in some social outreach. You know, you could ask, connect with somebody on LinkedIn, for example. You could just comment on their, you know, if they're posting actively on LinkedIn, leave a thoughtful comment. But this is really just kind of like making sure that they won't forget about you, because it's all about time. Things could happen where all of a sudden they have an urgent situation and you want to be the service that comes to mind right away. And I still believe that that's all like some of the traditional concepts of advertising people said really stay on, you know, in mind of somebody, front of mind. You have to have 12 touches. This is what helps building this out. So you stay in touch with people and they remember your name and your services in your company when the need arises.
A quick question on this, Boris. So when you make these phone calls, so these are during the nurture sequence and you've already reached out to them on LinkedIn and email, they've probably not shown interest, but at the same time, they've not unsubscribed, as you mentioned. What do you typically talk during these calls? You know, how do these calls go? Do you tell them that, hey, I've been sending you emails, I've not gotten a response? How do you make these calls?
So there's a few different concepts there, but essentially, I mean, the first thing you have to deal with is you get a lot of voicemail, right? So make sure that you have a very short script ready that just says, okay, if I get voicemail, I leave this voicemail. And in that voicemail, make sure to establish that you will reach out again, and that you also will follow up with an email. And for sure, make certain that you follow up with the email, because if you promise that you follow up with an email with some more details, and you don't, obviously that's already a loss right there. There's different ways. So like some people, it kind of like depends on your business. Some people kind of like focus on, in the call script, talking about value. Other people focus on they focus on a particular pain point that they solve. Other people, for them, it works better if they focus on the sort of like transitional experience that people may have, right? It all depends. It depends on your personal style. You get all the gatekeepers too, right? Like how many times you're going to get somebody that sits at a reception and they block you, and with them you want to engage as just like you would with a prospect that you're trying to reach. If they want to block it, you maybe, if they start having objections, you maybe want to investigate and see what is your current situation. It's like, I actually have a couple of scripts actually written down. So what could be a pain points and to look like? Hey, Surender. This is Boris. I'm working with Salesgear. Do you have a couple of minutes to talk? The reason for my call is that I work with small businesses, and they often have a problem with their sales team, and they have, particularly if you have small sales teams, they're overwhelmed with the amount of service they get in establishing a sales cadence that really develop revenue and growth for your business. Is that something that you struggle with? That could be very similar. Now, I'm not a sales coach. There's people that do that thing very good. There's a service at the end. In the last slide, I share a website of a service that specializes. They have actually quite a nice little software platform where they help you kind of like identifying the pain points and developing those scripts and how to deal with objections. But the one thing for sure is you need to be prepped, right? And you need to know, like, what do I say if I get a voicemail? What do I say if I get a gatekeeper? How do I deal? And what do I feel comfortable with? And how do I engage with that? There's a lot of different ways and methodologies to follow. Does that help?
Yeah.
So this is now what I wanted to show is, okay, we crossed the 6 months period where we like slowed down a little bit. And now at the end of this period, we're actually reaching just about 12 months. So what we want to do is, which for many people is the full cycle in one budget, right? And so what we want to do here is we're having our regular pace, which is every 20, 30 days, sending emails, outreach, social touches. And then we start slowly increasing the frequency again, which prospects will notice. They will notice that there's more outreach on social, that there's more, that you're trying to get on the phone with them. And especially if you've been consistently emailing them before and you have delivered value in every single email. And again, that's a core thing. You need to be able to deliver them, even if it's just like one small little gold nugget in every email. There needs to be something that they take away. So like, that was actually very helpful. That is something that I can use and I can apply potentially today. They really understand what my challenges are. So towards 12 months, you start increasing, which are shown here, getting from light yellow to kind of like red hot again. And you, for example, in the last outreach, you have the social touch, a voicemail or a phone call and the email at the same day. You really want to kind of like ramp that up again and see whether you can get them now. And then just like how we came out of the first cadence, with crossing over now in months 13 to 17, we kind of like don't want to drop the ball right away. We just want to kind of like slowly reduce the frequency kind of like get back to like the monthly outreach and reduce the frequency. I think the one of the things I want to keep pointing out, if you look to the right side, it's 17 months, 73 touch points, 30 emails, 23 phone calls, 20 social touch points. People will engage with you just for being that persistent. as long, because most people don't do it. And I've had that. I had it myself, actually, fairly recently. All right, I'm going to tell that story real quick because it sort of like makes sense in this case. I had a client, they engaged with me February of last year. I was introduced. We had a quick phone call. There was a great match in kind of like services I offer and what they were looking for. We had one more follow-up call afterwards. Friend disappeared, missing in action. Sent an email, nothing. So, in my sales cadence, there was an automated setup to set up a task every 3 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it's 4 weeks. I don't make it like always the exact same day. I like to have a little variation there, but there was a regular pattern to keep reaching out to them and so like asking how's it going, you still have the same problem. Can it be helpful in any way? Here's an interesting article on the topic, yada, yada, yada. And almost for an entire year. And all of a sudden, that popped right back up. Actually, we do have a client that has actually a lead. We would like to kind of like start talking about the services that you offer and how that potentially, could develop in a scope of work for that particular client. And I think by the time we are actually probably having a signed agreement, it will be probably mid-April, from February last year. I follow the same cadence. It works. So for some of your clients, especially if they're larger clients, and if you're talking, for example, SaaS, enterprise solutions, I think that and as we've seen at the statistics from the Gartner, like in the beginning of the presentation, the sales cycle can be a little bit longer, and it goes up to 22 months. So just like before, we want to have also like less frequent touch points. So on slide 12 here, we're coming out of month 13, we start slowing down. We're going through months, 13, 14, 15. And as we're getting to 18, 19, we start ramping it up again, increase the frequency of outreach, increase, call, reaching out on LinkedIn, asking for the meeting, try to get your foot in the door. Maybe you have a new gift to get, maybe you have something you can offer. Hey, I had one client that offers a very small niche CRM platform for a very particular niche in the financial services. And he figured out that there was one small component that everybody really was using on a very regular basis. And he looked at it and said, you know what, I can actually give that little part away for free, and people will start engaging with the platform, and it gives me so much opportunity to communicate to them. So he took like a very particular small component of the platform and gave that away for free, and it works. That is his gift to get. It opens the door, right? So if you have something like this, like throw it into the mix again, but you really want to increase again months 19, 20, 22. You want to really ramp up that cycle. And that cycle that we just went through, you can continue forever unless the client says unsubscribe, unless somebody tells you on the phone, look, I'm not interested, do not call me anymore. If they engage with your content, keep engaging with them, build out this content. In those slow phases where you're slowing down, you basically have 4 or 5 months at a time where you have like one email going out. There's so much space in there to develop the next sequence and come up for the next with the next content strategy part. So, I know for some of it now, I'm really sounding like a broken record by now, but because I've seen it so many times. So it's really, in summary, really map out your buying personas, their needs that they have at the different stages of the sales cycle, identify them. That's different for everyone, right? For some services, it's a very compressed thing. For some, it's much longer. It needs a lot more educating. I think documentation and really mapping things out is one of the greatest and most undervalued tool, because people they can't revisit something. It also helps tremendously if you have your entire sales process, your methodology and your sales cadence and your messaging nicely documented, and you add a new DSR to your team. It makes it so much easier to onboard them. Because you have it all there. You can, it's a two-day onboarding process. Clearly, my message is go for the long haul. This is really 6 to 8 weeks. I'm not cutting it. I think anybody that really is targeting only 6 to 8 weeks is leaving money on the table and is mistaken. For most platforms, there's always the exception, but I think go for the long haul. Having the sales cadence for obvious reasons, we discussed that. Automate and score prospects. Add score for like how many times are they opening an email? When was the last email outreach, email engagement? When was the last time? Every time they click on an email, if you can track if they're clicking through to your website, how many times have they visited the website? All of that builds a score. And the higher the score is, the more likely are you to engage with them, and you should prioritize those clients. If you have a list of 600-700 clients that the DSR needs to work, you shouldn't reach out to 600-700 clients. It's way too much. Not only do they burn out, but you're probably also wasting your time. And then be authentic, tell your story, show your success, the case studies, educate. And then one of the most successful phrases that ever was developer packaging, I think it was for shampoo that Procter & Gamble made. They said, rinse and repeat, right? And you just keep going again and again and again.
So before you move on to the next slide, so we'll take a couple of questions. We are nearing the end of our session. So for all the attendees, at the end of the session, we have a couple of offers that are exclusively for all of you. So there are some exciting offers, that you would really like. So before we get to that, we'll take a couple of questions from. We had a bunch of interesting questions come up. So here's one from. This is from Daniel. So you mentioned providing a nugget addressing value to the client with 100 plus touches. What if you run out of value statements? Do you just rinse and repeat? Over 100 touches, it's very difficult to establish value in every single touch. So what exactly do you do?
So let's say you identify a particular pain point that your services and your product solve. You can communicate to it about value. What's the value that brings to your business? You can address it directly. You can reframe it, right? And work with different ways. I think, you can talk about the transformational experience, right? Like, so for example, let's say a service like Salesgear, where you help people build out the sales cadence, the tasks, and automating the emails. You can talk about, like, you can build out the tasks, the task list in the emails, or you can also talk in a way as like, like, why are your DSRs so overburdened? And why that is also something that you solve as a value proposition or as a benefit, rather than talking directly about the sales, the pain point. It's work. It's not easy. I'm never like, I had a conversation yesterday with a prospect, and it became very clear that, like, he kept saying, like, well, that's a lot of work. I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of work, because it takes a lot of thinking. But if you want people to buy into your product and services, you do have to think. And if that doesn't come, it's not that it comes easy to you, but if you can clearly differentiate your service from another service, why is your business there? You need to do something better than everybody else, right? At least in your opinion. And so like I would probably start like looking at a comparison of all competitors and say exactly how do we are very different than that competitor and what we offer and what we do.
Awesome.
I hope that helps, Daniel.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So our next question. So this question is from Suraj Nanaya. So we are assuming, you're assuming that we are running a contact from an account for 20 months. So his question is, do people even stay in an organization for that long?
Well, I hope yes. I think people turnover for businesses, especially small businesses. The loss of knowledge is tremendous, right? And I would hope that every business is striving to build an environment where people want to stay longer than 20 months, because it's just the onboarding process. In my opinion, it takes like until you really have somebody kind of like being very familiar with the business and can work. There's like probably like 3 to 4 months at a minimum before they're really ready. If you have a 20 months turnover, you're wasting a lot of money right there. And I think you should ask yourself as a manager, like, why are you leaving people so often, right? Why are burn them out? Why is the churn so high? The other thing that I would have to say is like, in an ideal situation, the platforms that you're using and the marketing stack that they're using should be set up that if you have a new employee, they should be able to take over just at the same point where the person that left has gone. And actually that just happened with Salesgear. One of my clients, we're using Salesgear. Somebody that was a DSR has left, and we basically took a new person, and that person got assigned the lead. And I was one phone call with Prem, and he helped me out tremendously. It was done a day later.
Awesome. Cool. I think we've just run out of time. There are a few more questions that are available. So what we would do with those questions is I'll have them answered by Boris offline, and I'll send an email to all of you with answers to those questions. Unfortunately, we're not able to cover all those questions right now. So Boris, if you want to talk about the last couple of slides, we can wrap up.
Sure. So for everybody that's interested in some of the like the core concept that I mentioned, like how you build out your buyer personas for the 44% that didn't have them yet, and the questions you should ask yourself. I also use a framework from a company called strategizer.com, like how you build your unique value proposition out. I have a free download on my website. You can scan the QR code, or you can see the link here, and obviously we'll share the presentation so you have all of that in exchange for, that's my gift to get, in exchange for an email address. Those are templates in that ebook. There are links to high resolution versions of it, and they're all set up in a way you could also just take a marker and a whiteboard and map them out, or you print them out on a regular paper and let people fill them in. But they're really made for rapid development and like quick build out of some of those core concepts. The other thing I would like to offer, if there's a few things that are like require longer conversation, I will make myself available for like 30 or 45 minutes to people that schedule an appointment to my website with me. Obviously that's based on like what my current schedule is and availability. I can, I need to get work done too, but I will make myself available. And then if you kind of particularly struggling with like the sales script and how to do the messaging, there's a website called salesscripter.com. They actually have a really great series on YouTube, all available, and they have a website where they really walk you through that, and they do also coaching. Really like what they do. Very simple, straight to follow. You can knock that out in a day and a half yourself. And then Strategizer, I want to mention because you probably all know them. They were sort of like the same people that built the original business canvas are behind Strategizer, and they built out a very similar way of working to define your unique value proposition.
Awesome.
To you.
Cool. So we have an exclusive offer for from Salesgear as well to all the attendees. So Salesgear, if you're not aware, is a sales engagement platform that helps outbound sales teams engage with your prospects through email, LinkedIn, and phone call. So whatever Boris had explained, you can implement and execute on a platform like Salesgear. And Salesgear provides these features, it provides contact intelligence, it provides you with email address, phone numbers, etc. of your target audience. Also provides a very personalized multi-channel outreach that you can create and execute. And we also built in an AI-based writing assistant that helps you create all of the content, so which we find it to be pretty useful. And then we also have a dialer to make phone calls to any country in the world, and then also a calendar integration. So the offer that we have for all the attendees is there's a 50% off on all the Salesgear plans. So just reach out to us on our website at salesgear.io. We have a chat available. So you can just reach out to us on chat, and we'll make this offer available to you right away. Cool. So that's all that we have for today's session. Boris, thank you so much for your time. These are really valuable lessons. I can easily relate to this because the people that I have been talking to 6 months before, 12 months before, they are like very potential candidates to whom we can convert right now if we talk to them. So, but if we had them on a nurturing campaign, they would have probably reached out to us right away. So these are very useful tips. I can't wait to go and execute this with Salesgear as well. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Boris.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who's made time to attend this session, and have a great evening or have a great day. Thanks so much, and we'll meet you all for the next session sometime soon. Thank you.